Hello, my name is Morgan Popovich. This is the homepage to our website. And for the sake of this video, I will be going over causes of addiction, specifically the psychological factors. To get to that point, you want to go up to Learn More, click on Causes of Addiction. You want to scroll down and then click on Psychological Factors. There's going to be three options you can select. For this video, I'll mostly be going over Statement of the Issue and Social Innovation. We'll start off with Statement of the Issue. Here you'll see the research I found on psychological factors and their link to addiction. Psychological factors can include things such as trauma and abuse, personality factors, and mental health factors. Throughout my research, I found many sources that provided information on the link between addiction and the various psychological factors that I listed above. Those individuals who have experienced such things during childhood have shown an increased tendency to become dependent on alcohol and drugs. Specifically, about 2/3 of all addicts have previously experienced some type of physical or sexual trauma during childhood. This data helps to show the true effects of childhood trauma on addiction. Another article also supports this relationship and also describes how trauma can affect the brain. For example, the cortex, your brain center for executive control, becomes interrupted by survival-oriented instincts from deep inside your inner brain. These instincts overrule logical thinking, diminish cognitive processing, and decrease your ability to inhibit behavior. So even when you're trying to refrain from addictive behavior, and you really want to do that, you will experience an unstoppable urge to engage in it. This is one reason why it can be so hard to overcome addiction. This information helps one to understand some of the reasoning behind why our brains work the way they do, and how trauma changes us and affects our brains. There's also a lot of evidence on the connection between mental illness and substance abuse. For instance, the NBER reports that there is a definite connection between mental illness and the use of addictive substances. There's also a direct linkage between mental health disorders and the consumption of alcohol, cocaine, and cigarettes. At the very bottom, you'll see a little bit of information about treatment programs, and you can find more about treatment programs under the tab listed at the top of our website. So there's a brief summary of some of the psychological factors. I'm going to go to the previous page and click on Social Innovation. Throughout my research on this, I found a really remarkable organization called SAMHSA HRSA, Center for Integrated Health Solutions. This organization promotes the development of integrated primary and behavioral health services to better address the needs of individuals with mental health and substance use conditions. This organization works to gain insight from current addiction treatment programs, which includes common and significant challenges faced, lessons learned, and accomplishments, and use that information to develop new ideas, strategies to attack the issue of addiction. They also aim to inform other specialty substance abuse treatment providers interested in integrating primary care with the hope of spreading the idea of integrated treatment programs all over. This organization addresses the psychological factors of addiction well. This organization is actively participating in all stages of social innovation as described by the Young Foundation. They are recognizing the need for this social innovation, developing ideas and testing out their ideas. They're developing business models and strategies and influencing systemic change. While integrated addiction and primary care programs are not yet universal, cultivating a state and local delivery system infrastructure that supports the need for integrated services is essential to the success of this innovative process and to eventually lessen the prevalence of addiction. So to go along with the psychological factors that I listed before, this organization is really trying to tackle those and use those to help find a better solution and decrease the chances of addiction in the future.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Beer, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about what I covered for my group's global issue, which is addiction. I took a closer look at the environmental risk factors that play a part in developing an addiction. In order to find my section of articles, you can press Learn More, then you press on Causes of Addiction, and finally you click on Environmental Risk Factors. Here you can find my statement of the issue, multi-sector engagement, and social innovation articles. If you click on my first article, you can learn all about the environmental risk factors for developing an addiction. I talk about how this is not just an issue that is present in the United States. Although there were approximately 20.6 million people in the US over the age of 12 with an addiction in 2011, the UK is also being hit very badly by this epidemic. Almost 1 in 5 adults in the UK have personal experience of drug addiction either directly or through family or friends, and nearly 1.5 million adults will be significantly affected by a relative's drug use. President Donald J. Trump addressed the issue of addiction when he said, "The best way to prevent drug addiction and overdose is to prevent people from abusing drugs in the first place. If they don't start, they won't have a problem." Environmental risk factors can be divided into 4 specific categories. The first I'll talk about is the community domain. If a community has favorable attitudes toward drug use, firearms, and crime, their risk is increased. The second is the peer domain. In terms of this domain, the single biggest contributing factor to drug abuse risk is having friends who engage in the problem behavior. Peer pressure plays a huge role in how addiction surfaces. The third is the family domain. With this domain, an adolescent's first exposure to drug and alcohol use often takes place in the home. This usually depends on parenting practices and general home life. For example, if a parent is never around to see the sometimes obvious signs of drug and alcohol use, their child could be at risk. The fourth and final domain is the school domain. In terms of this domain, teens may be at risk for addiction when they lack some of the social structure that comes from good grades and commitment. Take a look at my second article. I focus more specifically on multi-sector engagement. Simply put, a tri-sector engagement approach can be defined as when a leader has a firm understanding of the private, nonprofit, and public sectors in order to take on the challenges that society presents today. One example of a tri-sector project that I came across is Phoenix House. Phoenix House grew from nothing in 1967 to a $4.7 million program in 1972, with 48% from government contracts and an additional 22% from the residents' public assistance payments. Phoenix House aims to serve individuals, families, and communities affected by substance abuse and dependency. This is definitely considered a nonprofit organization, but businesses and the government certainly intervene as well. The issue of addiction requires all of the sectors to come together, and one can see that through the Phoenix House's operations. According to Phoenix House's website, as a leading nonprofit treatment provider, they offer affordable, evidence-based care to teens, adults, and families, as well as unique programming for mothers with young children and the military community. At their adolescent programs, teens receive residential care while attending on-site accredited high schools. As you can see from this, Phoenix House addresses many of the environmental factors associated with addiction. In my third article, I talk about social innovation in the context of addiction. One strategy of social innovation is demonstrated by our labs in Cape Town. High unemployment and poverty have left communities plagued by drug addiction and gang crime, the lack of opportunity leaving many feeling hopeless, according to Lauren Treisman. Our Labs is a thriving social innovation space buzzing with energy, packed with enthusiastic community members sharing ideas, devising solutions, and developing products. The founder of Our Labs is building what he calls hope economies. He recognized that if he could bring community members hope by building their skills and confidence, it would enable them to become social entrepreneurs, contributing towards positive change in their communities. Another tactic of social innovation that addresses addiction was presented by Cigna. The major health insurer, Cigna, announced that it would no longer require pre-authorization to allow physicians to begin treating patients battling opioid addiction, according to Tori Utley. Though Cigna represents just one of many health insurance companies, this action marks a large step forward toward cross-industry collaboration to bring the opioid epidemic to an end.
Hi, I'm Emma Oscar, and I'm here to talk you through my team's website. My team focused on the opioid epidemic, and our website is titled Not Without Help. So right here you can see our homepage, and then I'm going to click on the Learn More tab. And this brings you to this nice little infographic we have that just discusses some facts about opiate addiction in the United States. And then I focused on treatment of addiction, so I'm going to click there. And specifically, I focused on detox medications, motivational interviewing, and cognitive behavior therapy. First, I focused on stating the issue of the opioid epidemic, and that as of 2015, according to the American Society of Addiction Medicine, approximately 586,000 Americans 12 years or older had abused heroin, which is a staggering number. Luckily, there is a lot being done for this issue, though. According to the Office of National Drug Control Policy, from 2013 to 2016, federal spending on substance abuse treatment nearly doubled from around $8 million to $13 million, which is definitely a good sign, but there is a lot more that needs to be done, which I'll discuss when I talk about my other articles. But as far as treatment goes, which is what I focused on, one big treatment option that's available nowadays is methadone, which is a medication that helps lessen the symptoms of opiate withdrawal and can help serve as a substitute to using heroin. It has to be prescribed to you by a doctor, and like addicts have to go to methadone clinics every morning to pick it up, but it has helped a lot of people stop abusing IV drugs, which is definitely a good sign. And another treatment option is cognitive behavior therapy, which is it's when you work with a therapist to help identify self-defeating thoughts or behaviors which drive addiction. So by changing those behaviors, it can help addicts get past it. For my second article, I talked about multi-sector engagement, and luckily a lot of public, private, and nonprofit organizations have come together to fight the opioid epidemic. An example of this is that in 2016, the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act was passed, and it pledged $180 million towards funding opioid addiction treatment because there are definitely not enough treatment facilities or treatment options available to people. And at the same time, healthcare companies such as Cigna Corp eliminated barriers that patients used to need to go through to be authorized to have treatment. So it makes it a lot easier for physicians to provide patients with the treatment they need, as opposed to jumping through all these hoops related to health insurance, which used to make it very difficult. And then finally, in the public sector, there are a lot of groups working towards just raising awareness, both to physicians and the general public, about the dangers of prescription pain medication and how often that's a gateway into heroin use. So by having the medical field, health insurance companies, government, and the general public come together, hopefully we can work to end the opioid epidemic. And the final article that I talked about was social innovation. And luckily there is a lot being done, new ideas coming forth to try and help fight the opioid addiction epidemic, which is crucial because it has just been progressively worsening, so we obviously need to do something new. One interesting thing that has been being done at the Mayo Clinic, they have a pain rehabilitation center that's trying to find ways to treat people's pain that doesn't involve narcotics, because as I mentioned before, a lot of people begin becoming addicted to opioids because they were prescribed them for real legitimate pain. So finding a way to wean those people off of narcotics by still finding a way to treat their pain is crucial. So Mayo Clinic is trying techniques such as relaxation techniques, cognitive behavior therapy, like I talked about before, as well as physical therapy. And then also big companies such as General Electric they held something called the Opioid Epidemic Hackathon in Boston, where they brought together all of these groups to try and brainstorm treatment options to fight the opioid epidemic. And one thing that they all decided need to be crucial was eliminating the stigma surrounding opioid addiction to help people who need treatment get it. And there was one group that recommended that all first responders should carry Narcan on them. Narcan is an intranasal reversal agent that can help someone who's overdosing, can literally bring them back to life. So if just police officers or EMS personnel had that, so many lives could be saved, and just giving people access to that would be really innovative and an awesome idea.
Hi, I'm Gary Shaw, and I'm a member of Group Addiction. Our team name is Not Without Help. Those primarily affected by addiction are, of course, the addicts themselves, their family members, and their employers. Addicts forsake all else as the relationship with their addiction replaces other financial and social relationships. Jobs are lost, family and friends either turn their backs on the addict or engage in behavior that just enables the addict to continue their destructive habits. Many seek treatment for their addiction. That treatment usually takes two forms. The first is detox and a stay in a rehabilitation center. That topic is covered by another of my teammates. I will cover the second stage of treatment, which occurs after the addict is released from a rehab center. Currently, there is not enough focus on support and treatment for an addict after they leave a treatment center. It's one thing to keep an addict in an isolated environment, get them clean, and give them some basic counseling, but it is entirely another to treat the root cause issues and keep them clean long term. Often addicts that are released have little means of support, both financially and socially. They are isolated by society. In treating the root cause issues, an addict can work to resolve their initial problem or problems and become a productive member of society. New coping skills need to be learned. The three main areas of treatment that an addict uses post rehab is group therapy, family therapy, and life skills training. These are offered individually or collectively through what is called an intensive outpatient program. A number of peer support groups, such as Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, are available on a global scale and have been around a long time. They have been proven effective. Family therapy engages the family in learning new strategies to support the addict in recovery, as well as to improve the home setting. Often, the addict has broken trust with their family, and these ties need to be rebuilt. And often, someone consumed by addiction never learns the basic skills, things like basic hygiene, financial responsibility, communication skills, and how to develop and maintain a relationship often must be learned or relearned. A tri-sector engagement approach is the public, private, and social sectors coming together in an alliance to work on solving a local, regional, or global challenge such as addiction. An example of a tri-sector project that is addressing that addiction issue globally is the San Patrignano Rehabilitation Community in Italy. At San Patrignano, group support, family therapy, and life skills training are addressed concurrently as part of their program. San Patrignano has an independently verified success rate of over 70%, not only in residents staying free from their addiction, but in fully reintegrating into society. Governments from around the world are studying their methods. Social innovation is primarily aimed at improving social outcomes and creating public value by attempting to transform the way societies address social problems and produce public goods and services. One social innovation would be to expand the group of stakeholders involved in recovery efforts by engaging primary care physicians to integrate addiction treatment with other health services. The fact that primary care physicians rarely screen for drug-related problems is an obstacle to early diagnosis and treatment. Primary care physicians would be a great resource to help coordinate the different types of care an addict in recovery needs. Another social innovation, treating drug addiction as a chronic condition as opposed to an acute condition, would result in more long-term care options being made available. Typically, drug addicts go to a treatment center where they receive 30 to 90 days of treatment for their issue and are then released. This is the model used for acute conditions like a broken bone, where you get treated for an issue and then you are deemed cured. But recovery from addiction can last months or years. If addiction was treated as a chronic condition, then the care would be more complex and long-lasting, giving the addict a better chance of succeeding. And finally, changing the conversation to treating drug addiction as a medical issue and not as a criminal issue would help remove the social stigma of drug addiction. If possessing and using small amounts of drugs were decriminalized, it would be possible to redirect the funding away from prosecution and incarceration towards providing healthcare services to addicts to help address their problems. Evidence shows that countries like Portugal, where people with small supplies of drugs are directed to treatment programs, have shown a decrease in drug addiction and an increase in the number of people receiving treatment. Many addicts in recovery continue to feel marginalized by society. For them, what may have started with some bad choices overcame them when their disease took over. They are deserving of our attention, our help, and our leadership to help bring an end to the global addiction crisis. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kiana Prisk, and I'm a part of the team Not Without Help. Our mission is to end addiction. I have firsthand experience with addiction because my mother was an addict for 10 years. For my part, I researched the biological causes of addiction. To get to my section, you go to Learn More and you click on Causes of Addiction. You're going to go to the first tab and it's Biological Factors. And then we're going to go to my statement of the issue first. Addiction has become one of the biggest epidemics in U.S. history. It has only been in recent years that people with addictive disorders are viewed as selfish, weak-willed fools. People believe that addicts choose to behave in such a selfish way without regard for others, and this is what I believed for a while with my mom. However, research has shown that willpower is not enough, and the biological makeup of individuals explains why this is so. So it's a lot harder than just having the willpower to quit. There's a lot of brain-altering things that are going on in the brain. Addiction is an intergenerational brain disease that has powerful biological underpinnings. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 21.5 million Americans aged 12 and older battled with a substance use disorder in 2014. Drugs change the literal structure of the brain. For example, research has shown that long-term drinking shrinks the brain and kills brain cells, and this has been proven with MRIs, PET scans, and CT scans. The effects of addiction on the brain doesn't stop with brain size. It also alters the brain's function. Drugs of any sort flood the brain with excess neurotransmitters and destroys the normal production of normal neurotransmitters. Dopamine is one of the primary neurotransmitters involved in addiction. And according to this website, all the major drugs of abuse, like alcohol, nicotine, opiates, and cocaine, increase dopamine levels, which makes the brain's ability to get back to a normal state much harder. When the brain structure and function is altered in such a way, the genes that are passed down through generations receive the same treatment. They are more at risk for addiction. The flooding of dopamine caused by the drugs takes a long-term toll on brain chemistry and promotes addiction. So this was my statement of the issue, and we're going to go back to the previous page, and this was my multi-sector engagement. Addiction is an epidemic that lies at the heart of the most pressing challenges facing business, government, and society today, and it can only be solved through collaborative efforts between the three sectors: the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. All of these sectors need to collaborate together so we can get a solution. Addiction is a brain disease that should be treated as nothing less, and there are many biological underpinnings that are rooted in the way substances alter the brain's basic structure. The tri-sector engagement approach entails natural empathy, a common language of opportunity creation, a less adversarial approach to regulation, and a shared commitment to innovation. The first step the mega community should tackle is lessening the overprescription of drugs, because it's absolutely ridiculous the way that doctors prescribe drugs without caring for who the individual is, what their risk is, what their biological makeup is, etc. Drugs are overprescribed at a dangerous rate, which make people who have biological susceptibility, like my mother did, more at risk. According to ConsumerReports.org, problems start with a single prescription medication, and patients are not given any warning at all. The second step of the private sector is providing more resources for people who are suffering with underlying health problems that make them more susceptible to addiction. These problems include mood disorders, anxiety, and depression. In my mother's case, she suffered with depression after the loss of her father, and then my dad divorced her, so she was very, very upset, and she turned to a substance to help her cope with her pain. So I just really hope that more resources are put out there into the world to know that people are not alone and there is help out there that does not involve taking drugs in any sort. The third step is providing nonprofit rehabilitation for people who cannot afford the expenses to battle addiction. People who do not have the funds are likely not to seek help, and society must recognize this problem as a whole and take this factor into account, because many treatment programs, especially the recommended inpatient programs that my mom went to, are simply cost prohibitive for many people. Thankfully, my mom's family stepped in and paid for it, but without them, I don't know what she would have done. So this is extremely problematic because addicts who may be ready for help put off treatment because of how expensive it is, and this is something that it just needs to be tackled by all three sectors. So we're going to go back to the previous page and then explore my social innovation. So to start, social innovation is the process of developing and deploying effective solutions to challenging and often social and environmental issues in support of social progress. Addiction has become one of the most concerning epidemics in the world, and there must be a remapping of our social structure in the way we view addicts and addiction. Because addicts are not all bad people, and they really are most of the time struggling with something, that they feel like they're alone and that no one can hear them. Often people think that addicts don't have the willpower to just stop or are just a bad person. However, this perception must be changed because that's not the case at all. Addiction is centered in the brain's pleasure and reward system. Addiction has everything to do with throwing the natural dopamine balance for a loop. So every time my mom tried to stop using her drug of choice, she really couldn't because she couldn't feel normal without it. So once we are able to come to a global understanding of what addiction really is and how the addict is truly sick, we will be able to teach the concept in a new light and feel about the concept in a different way. I think one of the biggest ways we can implement socially innovative techniques to prevent addiction is requiring adolescents to take classes in high school. Something needs to be done in the way most people perceive addiction and the real underlying factors, because it's mostly based on underlying depression, anxiety, mood disorders, the biological makeup of the individual, etc., like the social economic factors, the family they came from. It's just there's so many things that will lead to addiction because someone's trying to cope with their feelings inside and they don't know how to. It needs to be addressed from a newly social standpoint and brought into the world to expose the seriousness of innocent people falling victim to these substances. Many factors are often overlooked, like I said. The harder life becomes, the more people are susceptible to addiction. These people are no different than you or me and are seeking out brain-altering substances to balance out the discomfort of negative or hard-to-deal-with emotions. Just like my mom, when she lost her dad, she couldn't deal with it, so she turned to substances, and this is what needs to be addressed and stopped. From a social standpoint, it is assumed that addicts lacked moral principles or just don't want to change their behavior. Most people do not understand that addiction is a complex disease, and it's rooted in the biological makeup of the brain. Addiction is centered in the brain and is a repeating cycle that cannot be fixed unless we understand it as a disease. And we bring more compassion to these people and understand they're not bad people. Like, I have grown to forgive my mom because I understand what she went through. And that's all that the world needs. It's like forgiveness, compassion, and we need to stop this epidemic right now from happening.